The village of Duskwood lay cradled between jagged hills and dense forests, a place where shadows clung longer than light and the wind whispered secrets no one dared speak aloud. Its paths were narrow, lined with huts of clay and straw, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke, herbs, and damp earth. In this village, every smile was measured, every gesture weighed, and every child grew up learning that one misstep could bring ruin. Among the villagers lived Mira, a young woman of 17 summers, whose kindness and quiet intelligence had already earned her a small measure of respect. She moved through the streets with an ease that seemed effortless, carrying water from the well, helping elders gather firewood, and speaking gently to children who clung to her skirts. Yet even as she gave to others freely, she bore a burden in her own household, a stepmother who scowled at her very presence and siblings who whispered cruelly behind her back. Myra's father had been a quiet man, devoted to the land, and though he loved her in his way, he was timid in confronting his wife's harshness. Her stepmother, Vera, was a woman of sharp eyes and sharper tongue. She watched Mira as a hawk watches prey, marking every act of kindness and every word of wisdom as a threat. "Stop dawdling, girl," Vera snapped one morning as Mira knelt in the yard, showing the youngest sibling how to braid corn husks. "The earth does not wait for the soft-hearted." "Yes, mother," Mira murmured, rising with a respectful bow, though her heart trembled. Even her brothers, who should have been companions, were restless with envy. Kalen, the eldest, was proud and easily frustrated, his hands always seeking the reward they believed should be his alone. When Mira harvested herbs or fetched water with remarkable speed, he scowled, muttering that she had been favored by some unseen force. Their father said nothing, leaving tension to simmer quietly beneath the roof of their home. Yet the village itself seemed to favor Mira in subtle ways. The elders would nod at her advice, the market vendors offered her small gifts, and even strangers would pause to smile at her. Superstition, deeply rooted in Duskwood, whispered that those touched by favor from the spirits would glow with unseen light. Mira did not know if it was true, but she felt it in the hush of wind, the soft bending of grass as she passed, and the way animals seemed drawn to her presence. But admiration came at a cost. Wherever she went, envious eyes followed. A dropped basket of apples would become a tale of carelessness in her absence. A momentary glance, a laugh too bright, a hand extended in generosity, each action collected in the minds of those who longed to see her fall. On this day Mira walked through the village square, carrying a bundle of dried herbs. Children trailed behind her, listening eagerly to her soft voice, asking about the stories of spirits and ancestors she had been taught. Villagers watched from their windows, some with gentle smiles, others with thinly veiled suspicion. As the sun climbed higher, shadows lengthened in corners where envy and malice hid. Mira, unaware, hummed a tune her grandmother had taught her, a melody meant to summon courage. It fluttered in the warm air, brushing the thatched roofs, curling around stone walls, and carrying the hint of a fate she could not yet imagine. For in Duskwood goodness was not enough. And sometimes the earth itself refused to stay silent when the wicked sought to bury the light. The days that followed in Myra's household were a delicate balance of appearances and hidden hostility. Vera, her stepmother, watched her every move with hawk-like precision, recording each small act of care or kindness as a slight against her own authority. Every compliment Mira received from villagers or elders became fuel for Vera's simmering anger. "Why do you linger among them so long?" Vera asked sharply one morning as Mira returned from the market with a basket of fresh herbs. "Do you think the world will wait for your fancy talk and gentle hands?" "I only wish to help, mother," Mira replied softly, bowing her head. "Help?" Vera spat the word as if it were poison. "Help is for those who serve their own ends. You have nothing to earn here but discipline. Remember that." Even Myra's brothers, Kalen and Rivo, carried quiet envy in their eyes. Kalen was the elder, prideful and restless, always comparing himself to his stepsister. "Father favors her," he muttered to Rivo one afternoon as Mira worked in the garden. "She gets all the praise, all the trust. We are left with scraps." Rivo nodded, swallowing hard. "It's not fair. She walks through life as if the spirits themselves shield her. Even the elders look at her differently. Even father," his voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken resentment. "Their jealousy simmered quietly at first, manifesting in subtle acts. Misplaced tools, whispered lies, hints of blame whenever Mira accomplished a task. A spilled basket of berries became her fault, a missed chore her negligence. Yet Vera's guidance ensured these small injustices escalated without consequence. Mira, aware of their envy but unwilling to fight it, bore it with patience. She would bend, bow, and offer a gentle smile, believing that kindness might temper the anger in their hearts. But envy, she was learning, was not easily swayed. The tension reached a subtle crescendo during meals. The family gathered in the clay-walled kitchen, the air thick with the smell of roasting corn and simmering stew. Mira set the table, placing each item with care. "You sit too close to the fire," Vera snapped, nudging Mira back. "Do you think warmth will shield you from your own failures?" Mira swallowed silently, lowering her eyes. Kalen's jaw clenched, Rivo fidgeted, and even the youngest sibling seemed to shrink under the weight of the unspoken hostility. That evening, when the family sat under the faint glow of oil lamps, the brothers' plotting began to surface in whispers. "She thinks she is untouchable," Kalen said under his breath, glancing at Mira as she tended the small lamp flickering in the corner. "Father and the village elders praise her every step. She makes us look weak." Rivo's fingers drummed nervously on the table. "What can we do? She is faster, cleverer. She earns trust that is rightly ours. If we do nothing, then we change the rules," Kalen said, his eyes hardening. "We remind her that she is still only a child of this house and no more." Their conspiracy was silent, carried in stolen glances and half-smiles of agreement. Yet the fire of their resentment was growing, feeding on every instance of Myra's success, every kind gesture that elevated her in the eyes of those around them. Meanwhile, Mira remained unaware of the precise weight of their plotting. She moved through the day as she always had, her mind preoccupied with tending the garden, helping the elders, and teaching the youngest children to weave simple baskets. She noticed the looks, the tightened jaws, and the murmured phrases, but her heart refused to dwell on malice. Even as night fell and the household settled into uneasy silence, the whisper of plots lingered in the corners. In the shadows of the kitchen, by the sleeping embers of the fire, Kalen and Rivo conspired in hushed tones. Vera listened from her room, a smirk of satisfaction curling her lips. Mira, gentle and trusting, was about to face the first true test of her courage. But in the quiet night, the spirits of the village watched, unseen, their presence a silent promise that justice was not yet lost. For those who sought to bury her would soon discover that some lives are not so easily claimed by envy, cruelty, or fear. The Festival of Bones was the one time each year when the village paid homage to their ancestors. Lanterns hung from the gnarled branches of the ancient oak in the village square, and the smell of burning herbs mingled with the sweet scent of roasted grain. Villagers danced in a rhythm older than memory, their feet stirring dust and echoes from generations past. The festival was meant to honor spirits, but it had become a stage for the living, an opportunity for the village to display its virtues and vices, and for rivalries to simmer and flare beneath the bright glow of torchlight. Mira moved through the square with the ease of someone who belonged to both the living and the spiritual world. Children ran to her side, begging for stories of ancestors and spirits. Elders nodded approvingly, grateful for her patience and gentle demeanor. Even the shyest villagers could not help but be drawn to her warmth, her quiet strength, and the way her eyes seemed to catch the flicker of torchlight and hold it like a promise. Vera, Myra's stepmother, watched from the shadows, her lips pressed thin. Her daughters hovered nearby, trying to mimic Myra's gestures but failing in ways that made them appear clumsy and awkward. The envy in Vera's chest flared as she saw Mira praised for helping elders set up lanterns and guide children in the ceremonial dances. "See how they flock to her?" Vera hissed under her breath. "Even in celebration she steals the attention meant for those of us who command it. Even now she outshines us." Kalen and Rivo stood behind their mother, their jaws tight, eyes following every graceful movement Mira made. Each step she took, each smile she gave, was a silent accusation of their inadequacy. When the festival's main ritual began, the village gathered around the bonfire at the center of the square. Mira was invited to place the first offering, a small bowl of grain and herbs meant to honor the spirits of the departed. Her hands, steady and unshaking, laid the offering gently atop the fire, and a soft glow leapt from the flames, illuminating her face. The villagers murmured in awe, and for a moment, the festival felt magical, suspended between worlds. Vera's lips thinned further. She leaned toward Kalen. "She must be punished," she whispered. "If we do not act now, the village will crown her before the night is done. That child, she makes us invisible, powerless. And I will not allow it." Kalen's fists clenched. "Tonight we remind her of her place," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Rivo nodded, though unease flickered in his eyes. "And the spirits?" he asked. "What if the stories are true?" Vera's smile was sharp, cruel. "Then we will be the ones to control them. Fear is a tool as old as the earth itself." Mira, oblivious to the plotting, finished the ritual and stepped back. She guided the children in a circle dance, their laughter and movement weaving around the bonfire like living threads. The elders' approval was evident, and even the villagers who had been skeptical could not help but smile. The stepfamily's envy reached a crescendo as the villagers clapped and sang. Each cheer for Mira felt like a sting, each nod of approval a reminder that she held a place in the village's heart that no cruelty could easily dislodge. But beneath the flickering flames, a darkness gathered. Vera whispered into Kalen's ear, plotting, scheming. The festival, meant to honor life and memory, would become the stage for their betrayal. The bones of ancestors, long silent, might yet bear witness to the injustice that would soon unfold. As the night deepened, the shadows lengthened, and Myra's laughter rang through the square, the seeds of envy and cruelty took root. In the quiet of the festival's afterglow, unseen by the revelers, Vera, Kalen, and Rivo swore a silent oath. The girl who had charmed the village with her light would soon learn the weight of darkness. And the fire of the bonfire, flickering in the wind, seemed to pulse with a warning that even in joy, danger could be near. The night after the Festival of Bones was thick with unease, though Mira could feel nothing of it as she returned home. Her feet were dusty from the village square, and the scents of herbs and smoke still clung to her. The children she had guided in the dances slept quietly, their laughter now only an echo in her memory. She was unaware that shadows had crept silently into her home, and that the warmth she carried would soon be tested by darkness and cruelty. Inside the air was tense. Vera's eyes glinted with calculated malice as Mira stepped through the doorway. "Late again," she said, her voice low and cold. "Do you think you are above your household duties?" I only help the children," Mira murmured, bowing her head. "It is the festival, mother. I wish to teach them the rituals." Vera's lips pressed into a thin line. "Teach them? Or show off to the villagers? Every act of yours is a reminder of how little the rest of us matter." Her words stung, but Mira offered only a quiet nod. Yet even her patience could not temper the brewing storm. Kalen and Rivo watched from the corner, their eyes hard and calculating, each heartbeat synchronized with the pulse of their envy. Later that evening, under the cover of darkness, the brothers made their move. They cornered Mira in the backyard, a small, secluded space where the moonlight barely touched the earth. "Kalen. Rivo, what are you doing?" Mira asked, her voice trembling. "You have been too favored for too long," Kalen said, his tone sharp and cold. "Father praises you. The villagers praise you. Even mother, she cannot stand to see your success. You think your little tricks of kindness make you safe. But tonight you will learn your place." Rivo grabbed her arms, forcing her to the ground. Mira struggled, but the brothers were strong, their jealousy lending them strength beyond their normal selves. They struck her with wooden paddles and fists, the blows raining down like unrelenting thunder. Mira cried out, her voice muffled against the earth, the night swallowing her pleas. "You will not rise above us," Kalen hissed between strikes. "You will remember that we are stronger." The beatings left her bruised and gasping. She felt the bitter taste of blood in her mouth, the weight of helplessness pressing down upon her chest. Her vision blurred, but even in her pain she felt a faint spark within, a glimmer of the resilience she had not yet fully understood. When they deemed her weak enough, the brothers dragged her to the edge of the family burial plot, a shallow grave recently dug for an elder who had passed during the festival. Its dark soil smelled of decay and rain, a scent that made her stomach lurch. "Here," Kalen said, shoving her toward the pit. "This is your place tonight. Let the earth teach you humility." They forced her into the grave, the soil cold and damp against her skin. Mira tried to push herself up, tried to cry out, but the earth pressed against her, heavy and suffocating. The brothers threw clods of dirt atop her, each handful a declaration of their hatred. "You think yourself invincible," Rivo muttered as they filled the pit. "But no spirit, no magic, can save you from your rightful punishment." Myra's cries echoed in the darkness, muffled by the soil, her heartbeat thrumming in her ears. Yet even as the grave closed over her, she felt something impossible, a shift in the earth beneath her. The soil seemed to resist, roots twisting and bending as if the land itself refused to claim her. Her body was buried, but her spirit remained unbroken. Even in the suffocating darkness, a faint warmth flickered in her chest, whispering that this was not the end. And outside the grave, the wind carried a warning to the world. Some lives cannot be claimed, some spirits cannot be crushed, and some hearts, even when beaten and buried, are destined to rise. Darkness pressed against Mira from every side, the earth above her dense and cold. Her body ached from the blows, every limb heavy and unresponsive. The damp soil clung to her hair, her skin, her torn clothes. She could hear nothing but the muted whispers of roots shifting somewhere in the shadows and the rhythmic thump of her own heartbeat, echoing as if from a great cavern. Panic clawed at her chest. She pressed her palms against the cold earth, trying to feel a boundary, a way out, but there was only the suffocating soil, heavy and unyielding. Her mind raced, fragments of the day flashing like fire through the darkness. She remembered the festival, the smiles of the children, the soft nods of the elders, and then the sudden cruelty of her stepfamily. The memory was bitter in her mouth, mingling with the metallic taste of blood. She had thought the night would end with only bruises, but the grave had been their final verdict, to silence her forever. Tears mixed with dirt as she lay still, gasping for air that seemed to thin with each breath. I am still here, she whispered, her voice barely audible, swallowed immediately by the weight of the earth. I will not be forgotten. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time had lost its meaning in the darkness. And then she noticed something strange. The soil beneath her hands shifted slightly. At first she thought it was her own trembling, her fingers pressing against softened earth, but soon it became undeniable. Tiny roots quivered like nerves twisting toward her palms. The stones that had pressed her shoulders rolled slightly, almost deliberately, as if granting her space. Her breath caught. What is this? A faint warmth began to grow in the pit, radiating from the soil into her aching bones. The earth vibrated softly, and she felt a strange rhythm matching her heartbeat. Shadows of light flickered along the roots, tiny glimmers like the eyes of unseen creatures watching over her. For the first time since the attack, a spark of hope pierced the darkness. Mira pressed herself against the side of the grave and pushed against the earth. To her astonishment, the soil moved, bending to her will, shifting as though the grave itself refused to hold her. Panic gave way to awe as she realized that the earth was alive, and it did not wish to claim her. In her mind's eye, she began to see shapes emerging from the darkness, roots curling into patterns like runes, soil forming delicate, transient structures. They whispered to her, or perhaps the whispers were within her own thoughts. They told her of resilience, of patience, and of a power older than fear itself. "You cannot bury me," she murmured, though the words felt almost too small for the truth they carried. "I will rise. I will not be silenced." The soil responded. Cracks appeared above her, small at first, then widening, letting in threads of moonlight that seemed impossibly bright in the enclosed darkness. A cool breeze followed, carrying with it the scent of rain and distant flowers, as if the world itself had exhaled relief at her survival. Days passed in the grave, though time had no meaning here. Hunger gnawed at her belly, thirst parched her throat, and her body cried out with every ache and bruise. Yet through it all, the earth beneath her hands remained alive, offering tiny comforts, a softening of soil, a protective root curling to shield her from falling debris. And always, the faint flicker of light at the edges of her vision reminded her that she was not abandoned. She began to dream in the darkness. Flames danced along the walls of her mind, not destructive fire, but a guiding warmth, showing visions of strength, of paths she would one day walk, of the courage that would rise within her. Every dream left a mark on her, embedding itself in her memory and spirit. Her terror slowly transformed into resolve. She realized that the grave had not defeated her. It had revealed her connection to something greater, something eternal. She was alive not merely by chance but because she was meant to rise. By the time the first hint of dawn seeped into the grave, Myra's heart had become steady, her spirit sharp. She pressed against the soil once more, and the earth, now fully unwilling to hold her, shifted violently, sending clods rolling aside. Light filtered through the cracks, and for the first time she tasted air that was free, untainted by darkness. The grave had rejected her body, and in doing so, had gifted her the first glimpse of a strength she had yet to fully understand. The first rays of dawn had barely touched the horizon when Mira felt a presence that was not her own. The grave, though shallow, had become a sanctuary of transformation, and the earth beneath her pulsed with life, vibrating in rhythms she could almost understand. As she pushed herself from the loosened soil, flickers of light danced along the roots and rocks, tiny embers hovering in the dim glow. From these flickers emerged the spirits. They were not bound by shape, yet they carried form enough to be recognized, slender figures of light, translucent and flickering, their edges wavering like flames in the wind. Their gaze was neither kind nor cruel, it was probing, curious, and infinitely ancient. Myra's heart pounded, but she did not flee. Somehow she knew these spirits were not enemies, they were a test. You have been brought here by cruelty, a voice like wind through reeds whispered. But cruelty alone does not define you. Will you burn in despair or will you carry the flame? Mira swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I want to live. I want to rise. I want to. Words failed her, the enormity of the question pressing upon her soul. The spirits responded with visions, flashing through her mind in rapid succession. She saw the village ablaze with hatred, her stepfamily laughing as they enforced suffering, and the innocent villagers caught in shadows they could not see. Then as quickly the vision shifted to a glowing image of herself, fire dancing along her palms, guiding and protecting, a beacon of light against darkness. Another spirit appeared, larger, more commanding, its light deep and resonant. Power is not given lightly, it said. To hold fire is to hold responsibility. To shape it is to shape destiny. Will you claim it, or will you crumble beneath the weight of vengeance? Myra's chest heaved. Anger, grief, and fear churned inside her, but beneath them all, a strange calm settled, a recognition that suffering had not broken her. It had awakened her. I will not let them define me, she said finally, her voice firmer than she expected. I will carry what has been given, and I will do what is right with it. The spirits swirled around her, testing, challenging. They conjured illusions of fire consuming everything she loved, of shadows clawing at her heart. Every flicker demanded a choice: succumb to despair, surrender to vengeance, or rise with purpose. Myra's body shook as each vision passed, but she met every trial with courage, letting fear fuel determination rather than dominate it. You have chosen wisely, the largest spirit intoned. The flame is yours, but its weight will shape your path. The fire does not belong to those who seek only revenge. It belongs to those who can bear the pain and wield it for the balance of life. As the words faded, the flickers coalesced into something tangible. Mira extended her hands, and small flames leapt onto her palms without burning her skin. They danced lightly, warm and bright, a living manifestation of her trials and resolve. She gasped, turning her hands over and over, feeling the incredible energy coursing through her. The spirits watched in silent approval. Then slowly they began to dissipate, their light merging with the earth and air, leaving only the faint warmth of embers in her soul. Mira realized that she had been tested and found worthy, not by the village, not by her family, but by the forces older than any of them. She rose from the grave fully, the soil clinging to her like a second skin, yet she felt different. Not weakened but strengthened. Not terrified but empowered. She understood that the earth had protected her, the spirits had guided her, and the cruelty of her stepfamily had unwittingly forged her into something more than human. Even as the wind rustled through the trees and the first birds began their morning songs, Mira felt a strange connection to the world around her. The living, the spirits, and the unseen forces that had once been silent observers. She now carried fire in her hands not as a weapon, but as a symbol of resilience, justice, and awakening. The path back to the village stretched before her, winding and uncertain. Yet for the first time in her life, Mira did not fear what awaited. She knew that when she returned, she would not be the same girl who had been beaten and buried. She would be a force beyond cruelty, a light against shadows, a bearer of the fire that could neither be stolen nor extinguished. And as she took her first steps toward the village, the embers in her palms flickered higher, casting long shadows across the earth, the promise of reckoning and the dawn of a power that had been waiting all along. The morning sun had barely pierced the horizon when Mira emerged fully from the grave. The soil clung to her hair and clothes, the damp earth leaving streaks across her skin like war paint. But she walked taller now, her chest lifted, her hands steady. Flames danced across her palms, warm and radiant, yet they caused no pain. She flexed her fingers and the fire obeyed, bending to her will with every subtle movement. She had been transformed, not merely in body but in spirit, and in ways that surpassed the mortal understanding of her family and village. Each step away from the grave felt like shedding a heavy weight. The bruises on her arms and the lingering ache in her back reminded her of the cruelty she had endured, but they no longer dominated her thoughts. She had been forged in the darkness, tempered by pain and solitude, and had emerged with power that carried the imprint of the earth, the spirits, and the fire itself. Mira paused at the edge of the burial plot, staring back at the soil that had tried to claim her. It was quiet now, as if the earth itself was satisfied that its work was complete. She pressed her palms together, and the flames swirled between her fingers, casting flickering shadows that danced like spirits on the ground. She felt a deep connection, an understanding that the power she now held was not for petty revenge, but for protection, for balance, and for justice. As she moved through the village paths, Mira noticed that the world seemed altered in subtle ways. Birds perched nearby, unafraid, singing melodies that seemed directed at her. The trees and grasses swayed as if acknowledging her presence. Even the wind carried a warmth that mirrored the fire in her hands, a gentle encouragement that life could be beautiful even after suffering. Yet the village itself remained unaware of the extraordinary change that had overtaken her. Mira's family, oblivious to her emergence, believed she had perished in the grave. Her stepmother, Vera, had already begun to boast to neighbors about her clever scheme, certain that Mira's absence confirmed her control. Kalin and Rivo spoke quietly of their victory, unaware that the very night that had been meant to cement their cruelty had instead transformed their victim into a being beyond their comprehension. Mira approached her home cautiously, not out of fear but to observe, to understand the depth of betrayal. She watched as her stepmother prepared a meal, the same sharp glances cast toward the empty space Mira once occupied. The brothers lounged nearby, confident in their impunity. Mira's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. With a subtle gesture, the fire in her hands rose, curling around her palms like living ribbons of light. The flames were not destructive. They were controlled, obedient, and alive. Mira tested them gently, tracing patterns in the air. Each swirl left a faint, warm glow that lingered for moments before fading. She could feel the power coursing through her, a combination of anger transformed into strength, pain transmuted into resolve, and fear shaped into clarity. Her family continued their routine, unaware of the force that had returned. Mira could have confronted them immediately, could have struck fear with the power she now wielded. But she did not. Instead, she chose observation first, letting the quiet fire of patience build within her. The spirit's lessons had not been of vengeance alone. They had taught her wisdom, restraint, and purpose. She slipped past the house and into the wider village, letting the streets themselves become familiar again. She passed the elders, who looked puzzled but did not yet recognize her. Children paused in their play, sensing something different in the air, though they could not yet understand it. Mira allowed a faint flicker of flame to escape her hands, illuminating the path ahead, revealing hidden corners, lighting the darkened spaces with gentle warmth. By midday, Mira had retraced her steps through the village, sensing the rhythm of life, testing her control, and understanding her new reality. She was not simply alive, she was a guardian, a bearer of fire, and a symbol of survival. The trials she had endured in the grave had forged more than endurance, they had forged purpose. And in that purpose Mira found peace. Her transformation was complete. No longer merely a girl betrayed by her stepfamily, she had become something greater, a force of life, light, and judgment that could not be denied. The flames she carried were a reflection of her spirit, brilliant, controlled, and unyielding. She raised her hands to the sky, letting the fire ripple across her fingers. It responded, dancing with a joy and freedom she had not yet felt, casting sparks that hovered like tiny stars. Mira knew without question that she had changed. The grave had rejected her body, but the spirits and the fire had claimed her soul, preparing her for the world she was about to re-enter, one in which cruelty could no longer define her, and strength would be her true inheritance. Night had fallen over the village like a velvet shroud, soft and silent, broken only by the occasional crackle of a distant fire or the murmur of nocturnal creatures. Mira moved along the familiar paths, but everything seemed different. The streets she had walked countless times now felt like a stage awaiting her presence, and the houses she knew by memory seemed smaller, shadowed by the vastness of the sky. Flames licked her palms, bright against the darkened world, but gentle, controlled, and alive. She was no longer merely Mira, the girl who had been beaten and buried. She was Mira, the bearer of fire, a force that the village had yet to comprehend. As she approached her home, she paused. Her stepmother's house, with its warm lights spilling from windows, looked ordinary, deceptively calm. Mira's breath was steady, her eyes clear and determined. She had no desire to hide her presence. The moment had come for the world to witness the transformation born of cruelty and injustice. She stepped into the courtyard, flames rising like living wings from her palms, casting an ethereal glow over the familiar walls and pathways. Birds stirred in their nests, and the wind carried the scent of smoke and blossoms. The villagers, roused by the strange light, began to emerge from their homes. Their faces were painted with a mix of fear, curiosity, and awe. "Is it Mira?" one child whispered, clutching a parent's hand. "By the spirits," an elder murmured, shielding their eyes from the glow. "She lives, and yet she is changed." Mira's gaze swept over the crowd. She saw her stepmother's shock, the frozen expressions of her brothers, and the murmuring villagers who had once believed her gone. The fire in her hands pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, steady and controlled, yet impossible to ignore. Vera stepped forward, her voice trembling, trying to mask fear with authority. This cannot be. Mira, what have you become? What magic is this? Myra's eyes were calm, her lips curved in a small, almost imperceptible smile. I have become what the grave could not take, she said softly, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. I am alive. I have endured. And I have been given power by the earth, the spirits, and the fire itself. Kalin and Rivo shifted uncomfortably, their bravado failing in the face of her calm authority. The flames in her hands rose slightly, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and curl toward them, illuminating their guilt and fear. You believed you could destroy me, Mira continued, stepping closer. You thought the grave would silence my spirit. But the world has other laws than cruelty and envy. I have returned, not for vengeance alone, but to set right what has been wronged. A hush fell over the villagers. They watched, transfixed, as the fire in her palms danced like living symbols of resilience. Children's eyes widened in wonder, and even the elders, who had seen many strange things, felt the weight of the power she now wielded. Vera's voice broke. Please. You will answer for your cruelty, Mira said gently, though her fire flickered, not with anger but with authority. The truth will be seen. The village will witness what has been done. The fire seemed to pulse in response, illuminating marks of guilt and deceit. The ground near her brother's feet charred lightly, not to harm them, but to reveal the truth they could not hide. The villagers gasped, understanding that this was no ordinary light, no simple miracle, but the embodiment of justice itself. Mira lowered her hands, letting the flames settle, glowing softly as a beacon. I have returned, she said. Not to be feared but to protect. Not to rule but to guide. From this day forward, cruelty will not have dominion in this village, and those who harm others will face what the spirits and fire have prepared. A mixture of awe and reverence spread among the villagers. Slowly they stepped closer, their fear tempered by recognition of her resilience, their whispers turning into blessings and gratitude. Children reached forward, eyes shining, hoping to touch the warmth of her hands, the fire that could not be extinguished. Myra's stepfamily shrank back, defeated by the sheer presence of her power, and by the knowledge that the girl they had tried to bury had returned as something more than human, more than mortal, more than they had ever anticipated. And under the canopy of night, with the stars watching silently above, Mira stood at the center of her village. Her fire glowed steady, a living testament to endurance, courage, and transformation. The return of the girl once betrayed was complete, and the world would never forget the power that had emerged from cruelty, darkness, and the grave. The morning after Myra's return was unlike any the village had ever known. Word of her emergence spread quickly, carried from house to house, over fences, through alleyways, and finally into the ears of those who had believed themselves triumphant the night before. The courtyard that had once witnessed her stepfamily's schemes now became the stage for their reckoning. Vera, Kalin, and Rivo gathered in the center, their faces pale and tense. They tried to summon the bravado they had once wielded so carelessly, but it faltered beneath the weight of truth and power. Mira approached calmly, the fire in her palms flickering like living judgment, casting shadows that revealed not only her own strength but the duplicity of those who had sought to destroy her. You claim innocence, Mira said, her voice measured, carrying the weight of the grave, the spirits, and the fire that had been entrusted to her. You claim that your actions were justified, that your hands are clean. Yet the earth, the spirits, and the fire do not lie. The flames rose higher, coiling around her wrists like serpents, illuminating the subtle signs of guilt etched into the faces of her stepmother and brothers. Kalin's jaw twitched, Rivo's hands shook. Vera's lips pressed tightly together as she tried to maintain control, but the light in Myra's eyes, mirrored by the flames, exposed every falsehood. You hid your cruelty behind shadows, Mira continued, stepping closer. You struck without conscience, buried without mercy, and believed that death could silence what you feared. But the grave rejected me. The spirits tested me. And the fire revealed the truth. A gust of wind swept through the courtyard as if the earth itself responded to her words. Dust swirled, leaves danced, and small embers lifted from her hands, floating gently around her stepfamily. Each ember hovered near them, illuminating every lie, every deceit, and every act of malice they had attempted. The fire judges, Mira said softly, though the words carried like thunder. And it has chosen to speak. The villagers watched, mesmerized and fearful. Many stepped back instinctively, sensing the power that no mortal could contain. Yet they were also drawn forward, compelled by the truth that had always been hidden in plain sight. The whispers of children, the nods of elders, and the widened eyes of young men and women bore witness to the scene unfolding. A reckoning that was not enforced by sword or law, but by forces far older and wiser. Vera tried to speak, to deny her actions, but the fire responded. Embers rose higher, forming patterns around her, burning neither flesh nor clothing but pressing into her mind with clarity. Every deceit she uttered fell away, stripped by the flame's illumination. Kalin and Rivo flinched as the fire coiled near them, a living mirror reflecting their guilt, their envy, their cruelty. "You see now," Mira said, her voice steady, "that the truth cannot be hidden, that injustice cannot remain unchallenged. You have acted against me, against life itself, and the world has answered in kind." The villagers murmured, some gasping, some weeping softly. A few who had doubted Myra's survival now knelt in awe, recognizing the extraordinary transformation she had undergone. Children peered curiously at the flames, captivated, while the elders bowed their heads in reverence, acknowledging a power that transcended their understanding. Vera sank to her knees, her hands trembling. "Mira, forgive me. I did not know." Myra's eyes softened, but the flames around her did not diminish. "Forgiveness is a choice," she said. "And justice is a necessity. You will face the consequences of your actions, but the fire you see is not vengeance. It is the law of balance, the judgment that restores what was lost." The fire pulsed, illuminating the courtyard, scorching the ground lightly where it lingered near her stepfamily, not as punishment of flesh but as revelation of truth. Every false claim, every hidden cruelty, every whispered plot was laid bare before the villagers. Kalin and Rivo could no longer hide behind bravado. Vera could no longer mask fear. The villagers, empowered by the clarity of truth, stepped forward to demand accountability. Mira did not strike them, nor did she need to. The presence of the fire, the weight of her ordeal, and the undeniable exposure of guilt were enough. The judgment was not hers alone. It was the judgment of the earth, the spirits, and the fire, forces that had witnessed every misdeed and upheld balance in ways human hands could not. As the day progressed, Mira remained at the center of the courtyard, the flames a steady, living presence. The stepfamily, broken in spirit, could only endure the judgment that was both supernatural and inevitable. The villagers bore witness, and the story of cruelty, survival and justice etched itself into the memory of the community forever. By nightfall, the courtyard was quiet but transformed. The fire in Myra's hands glowed softly, no longer demanding attention but offering protection and illumination. The judgment had been passed, the truth revealed, and the balance restored. Mira stood not in triumph but in quiet authority. The girl who had been buried, beaten, and betrayed had returned not as a victim, but as a guardian, a force that ensured that injustice would not go unanswered, and that cruelty would meet the reckoning it deserved. The first light of dawn broke gently over the village, soft pink and gold washing across rooftops, fields, and trees. Mira stood at the heart of the courtyard, the fire in her palms now a calm, steady glow, warm, inviting, and alive. The villagers gathered around her, their faces filled with awe, gratitude, and lingering wonder. Even in the early morning light, they could see that Mira was no longer simply a girl. She was the fire-bearer, a living embodiment of resilience and justice, the bridge between the mortal world and the spirits who had shaped her. Her stepfamily knelt before her, humbled and fearful. The ordeal they had inflicted upon her had been answered, not through rage but through the unyielding truth revealed by fire and spirit. Kalin and Rivo avoided her gaze, their hands trembling as they realized that their cruelty had forged something greater than themselves. Vera's lips quivered as she searched for words, yet none could undo the weight of her actions. Mira inhaled deeply, the warmth of the flames reflecting in her eyes. She had a choice, vengeance or mercy. The fire pulsed lightly, attuned to her heartbeat, responding to the decision that had been incubating within her spirit through nights of darkness and trials. The crowd watched in suspense, sensing that this moment would define the village's future as much as her own. She stepped closer to her stepfamily, flames flickering but gentle, illuminating every expression on their faces. "You believed that fear and cruelty could bind me, that the grave could end me. But life, like fire, finds a way," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of authority without malice. "The choice is mine, but it is not for me alone. It is for the balance, for the village, and for all who have suffered because of injustice." The flames around her hands swirled into shapes, forming symbols of protection, light, and renewal. Sparks drifted upward, floating like fireflies, carrying with them the message of her choice. Mira raised her palms, and the fire pulsed once, affirming the path she had chosen. She would show mercy, but with lessons firmly etched into memory. "You will live," she said, her voice unwavering. "But your power over others ends here. You will labor to restore what was broken, to heal what was wounded, and to serve the village with humility. Let this fire remind you that life is not yours to control through fear." The stepfamily's relief was palpable, but it was tempered by the gravity of the consequences. Myra's mercy was not weakness, it was strength measured by wisdom, courage tempered by justice. The villagers murmured their agreement, some stepping forward to witness the reconciliation, others bowing in respect for the girl who had endured so much yet chosen righteousness over vengeance. Mira then turned her attention to the villagers, lifting her hands so the fire shimmered brightly. "This flame is not mine alone," she said. "It belongs to all who cherish life, who protect the weak, and who honor truth. Let it guide you, inspire you, and remind you that courage can rise even from the deepest darkness." Children approached cautiously, their eyes wide with fascination and reverence. Mira bent slightly, letting them touch the warmth of the fire. Each child felt a spark of hope, a connection to something greater, and a sense that bravery and resilience were qualities they could carry forward. The elders nodded approvingly, recognizing that the village had been reborn, not in spite of its trials but because of them. The day unfolded with a sense of renewal. The villagers helped repair homes, tilled fields, and rebuilt communal spaces, their actions infused with the energy of the firebearer. Mira walked among them, guiding, teaching, and watching as life returned to a rhythm of balance and harmony. Even her stepfamily labored alongside others, learning humility, diligence, and the respect that their actions had once denied. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the village, Mira climbed a small hill overlooking the settlement. She raised her hands once more, and the fire leapt higher, creating a radiant beacon visible for miles. From that flame, every villager lit torches and lanterns, carrying a piece of the eternal fire throughout the community. It was a symbol of survival, strength, and unity, an unbroken chain of courage passed from one generation to the next. In that moment, Mira understood fully what the spirits had intended. She had endured cruelty, betrayal, and death, yet she emerged not only alive but transformed. She had chosen mercy without sacrificing justice, and in doing so had reshaped the balance of power forever. The girl who had been buried beneath the earth was now a guardian, a teacher, and a symbol of hope for the entire village. The sun bathed the village in golden light. Mira lowered her hands and the fire dimmed gently, resting in her palms like a living heart. She looked over the people she had protected and guided, and for the first time in her life she felt fully at peace. The grave had rejected her, the spirits had guided her, and the fire had chosen her. Together they had forged a new dawn, not just for her but for all who would walk in the light of her eternal flame.